Hello, today is March 30th, 2009. We're meeting today with Mr. Larry Corky Colgrove at his home in Fort Lupton, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Corky, and thanks for participating in the project today.
Enjoy it.
Very good. Well, let's start out if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family, a little bit about growing up.
Okay, I was born in Mott, North Dakota, May 25th, 1929. So in 2 months I'll be 80 years old. I was born in Mott. The next town up the line is Regent, and I was raised there. And I graduated in the next town from high school in New England. There's the only 3 towns in the county, so I've been in all 3 of them. My folks, my great-grandfather came from Missouri and was the first settler in Henninger County, North Dakota. And my grandfather was the first county commissioner in Henninger County. So my family goes way back. I can trace my family directly to 1680, when my grand patriarch came from Wales to New York and settled in Rhode Island. And I think the reason they went to Rhode Island was that Roger Williams, you remember him, he was a guy that was kicked out of Massachusetts because of his religion. Well, they both came from the same town in Wales, so I think they knew each other. And that's where the family settled. And I'm 9th generation, my granddaughters, of course, are 11th. But that's the end of it, because we have no boy, I don't have any grandsons, so my branch is going to die off.
Now, how many siblings did you have?
I have one son.
I mean, in your early life, any brothers and sisters?
Oh, I have one sister, one half-sister, and 2 stepsisters. I lost my train of thought. I went to high school in New England. I flew when I was in high school. I flew an airplane.
Oh, is that right?
And it's interesting to know that the man that taught me how to fly was a P-51 pilot in World War II. And he came home to his father's son and was going to get rich teaching everybody how to fly. I was his first student. It cost me $75 to solo.
That was quite a bit of money back then, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, no. Think of what it is today.
Yeah. But I mean, in dollar terms back then, that seemed like a lot of money.
Yeah. And then after to give you a little background on him, he later went back to service and become a general. And he was commanding officer of the Happy Hooligans, one of the most famous fighter outfits in history, from the North Dakota Guard. And he's a heck of a nice guy, but he taught me how to fly.
Is flying something you'd always wanted to do as a little kid?
Oh yeah, all I cared about was airplanes. I could tell what it was when they flew over, by the sound, I can't do that anymore, but I used to be able to do that. But my dad bought an airplane with a friend, and they wouldn't let me fly it because it was too expensive. It cost $3,600 brand new. And at that time, you could buy a J3 Cub for $1,800, but this one was $3,600, so they wouldn't let me fly. So Oscar, his partner, had a part in a flying club, so I flew. My dad bought that part from him, and I flew in a club during high school. But I didn't fly too much because it cost $3.50 an hour. If you only make $5 a day, you can't. And I didn't have a job, so I flew little. I got about 30 or 40 hours. And then when I got out of high school, my dad quit paying for it, and that was the end of my flying. So, being an airplane nut, I joined the Air Force. Went to
Now, the Air Force at that time was still part of the Army Air Corps, correct?
Army Air Corps, yeah.
Okay.
But 4 of us went to the West Coast and to Seattle. 2 of them went to the Army, and Skeeter, my buddy, and I went to Air Force. I had to about break his arm to get him to go, and he stayed 23 years. So he became career man. But anyway, I was signed in McCord Field. I went from there to 5 days on a train down through LA, through the desert, to San Antonio to basic training. Basic training was an old World War II, all the old World War II buildings.
Well, now let's kind of set it somewhat of a timeline here. Roughly, when did you enlist?
Oh, right out of high school.
Which would have
Well, I was sworn in on 29th of June, 1947.
47. Okay.
So technically, I'm a 2-day veteran of World War II. Well, because I got the GI Bill from World War II. And I got out the first day, the 28th of June of 1950, which made me 1 day Korean time. So,
I'll be darned.
an all-time twin.
Yeah.
Anyway, they sent me down to Lackland Air Force Base and in Texas in the summer. Oh man, is that miserable down there. And we had an old tar paper shack. And, I've been there since, and it's a beautiful base now, but when I was there, it was a mess.
How was the transition from civilian life into military life for you?
Well, I liked it. I really enjoyed it. And I was lucky. I took a test and I got to be a mechanic. I had an aptitude for mechanics, so they sent me to, excuse me, my voice is failing. They sent me to Keesler Field, Mississippi, and that's where I went 10 months to school to become a mechanic. When I got out in June of 1948. The Berlin Airlift started while I was on, I bid Germany and got it. But I got 30 days en route at home in North Dakota. So I went home, and the Berlin Airlift started on the 26th of June. Well, I was still on vacation, or on leave. I got on a train and went to Westover Field. That's in Springfield, Missouri.
Massachusetts.
Or Massachusetts. And flew me over to the Azores, to Paris, to Rhine, Maine. So I didn't have to ride a boat. I got to fly, because that's the outfit I was in. It was my squadron. And I arrived on July 11th of 1948. Was in the 1000th Air Base Squadron of the Air Transport Service. Within a couple of weeks, they changed it to Military Air Transport Service, which is MATS, and was included the Navy transports. And this was a worldwide operation. They hauled GIs and, VIPs all over the world. And that's what I was in. So my first job in Rhine, Maine was working on airplanes that hauled people from Westover, just like I did, the one I came in. And we would turn them around and send them back. And, we worked on C-54s, and then we had 2 or 3 C-47s in the squadrons. They used them to run errands, because my colonel, I worked for a colonel, full colonel, and he had several detachments like Dairan, Saudi Arabia, Tripoli, Nice, France, Italy, I don't know, several of them, but he was officially in charge of all these. So this 47 would fly around, and I don't know what they hauled, people and so forth. And I worked on those airplanes. And also the C-121 was new. That's the old 3-tailed monster, the Lockheed Constellation.
Wow.
I worked on that. And after about a year, I want to tell you something. The Air Force had a lot of bums, absolute drunks and bums, And we had our share of them. And being a farm-type boy, when they told me to do something, I went out and done it, And I was noticed. And the line chief took me to lunch one day, and he bought my lunch, and coming back, he says, "Hey, Corky," he says, "I want you to volunteer for the C-74, because they had sent a crew over, and they were starting to go back. They were on TDY, temporary duty. Mm-hmm. Temporary duty yonder, that's what I always used to say." Anyway, I said, sure, if you want me to work, I'll do that. So here I am a PFC, and I go down to this crew, and they're leaving us after a few days, or months. And I was a PFC, and I replaced a master sergeant, can you imagine? And I worked for Colonel Fred O. Easley, a lieutenant colonel, one of the nicest guys I ever met in my life. And when he came down the line, we called him Colonel if he was with somebody. If not, he was Fred. Just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he made this deal with us that if we would work anytime the airplane was on the ground and stay there till it left, we had no duties, no inspections. They blocked off the end of the barracks where we could sleep anytime we wanted to. We could go, we had passes, we could go to the flight mess, which was steaks versus mutton in the regular mess. And we just had it made. We answered to nobody but the colonel. And I was able to pick 7 of my buddies to be on the crew. And I had 10 Germans, mechanics. And they worked shifts, so that every shift we would have 2 or 3 on. They had day shift, swing shift, and midnights. But the GIs and I, we worked straight through. And the longest I ever remember was 79 hours.
Straight?
Yeah.
Is that right?
But we had a secret weapon, and we didn't, even the colonel didn't know about this. The minute we went on duty, we would send one guy up in the crew quarters of the airplane to sleep. 2 hours, the next guy go up, and we just rotated, kept going. And so that gave us 3 hours of sleep in 24-hour period. So that's what kept us going, because there's no way a man could work that long.
Yeah.
But
Well, even was that even enough sleep though for you?
Well, yeah, but I tell you, I've been so tired that your rear end scratches and you scratch your ear instead. I'm not kidding. But the colonel made me a corporal right off the bat, and then later a sergeant, and all the guys I picked, I think maybe all but 2 of them made sergeant while I was there. And we worked on these C-74s.
Now, were these the ones coming from the States, back and forth the States?
Yeah, they came from Mobile, Alabama, and normally they hauled engines. And they hauled 16 engines on a 3-point, which means they sat on their tail. And then when they got to Rhine, Maine, they went into one hangar. And they put them all together, with the cowling and all that, and then you could hang it on the airplane. But they burned up lots of engines, because in those days, if you got 400 hours out of an engine, that was pretty darn good. Nowadays these jets run thousands of hours, But we had it made, I'll tell you. I want to tell you about one story. One of the sergeants and I went across the field to get an airplane one night. We had to taxi him back to the other side where the hangar was. And it was snowing, and this is about 1 in the morning. They had wind covers on this C-54. So we get it all fired up. When we get down, we get to the runway, and they made us hold. We sat there about close to 3 hours as 150 airplanes went by our nose.
Is that right?
And snow so bad, all you could see was a flash of a green light go by. The roar of the engines. And we couldn't move, and we couldn't run our engines up because they had wind covers on. And that was kind of hairy sitting there, because we from here to the street, 100 feet from the runway.
Yeah, could have been
And those guys, when they took off, they would jump from light to light. They could maybe see 2 at a time, That's the way they took off. And they took off in a steady stream. The whole field went at once.
Wow.
What they called a block. And there'd be one at the end of the runway pulling up, one halfway down where we were sitting, and one just opened his throttle starting on. It just continues for 2.5 hours, I don't know, whatever it took for 150.
Now, was Reinhold the central...
Rhine, Maine was... Well, there was... Let me explain what the situation was.
Yeah, please do for the viewers that are watching this.
Germany, after the war, in the Potsdam, what do you call it, Potsdam meeting
Agreement.
with Stalin, France, England, and Roosevelt. No, it's Truman.
Truman.
They divided Germany up into 4 zones. In the middle of the Russian zone was Berlin. So they divided it up into 4 sectors. So the French had a sector, the English had a sector, we had a sector, and the Russians had a sector. Well, Stalin got the bright idea he was going to force us out of there. So he created a blockade, and it was because the Americans had changed the money. And what effect that had, I don't know, but Stalin cut off the rail, blockaded the canals and the roads, but in the Potsdam Agreement were 3 corridors going into Berlin.
Air corridors?
Yes,
Okay.
and they were 20 miles wide, 10,000 feet high. So it's like going down a tunnel, you know. And they would fly these airplanes up to 1 minute intervals. So one would be, say, at 2,000, the one behind, first one would be high. Then the next one, say 10,000, then 8,000, 6,000, 4,000, 2,000, then they start again, you know. And they were just a stream of airplanes.
So Stalin was under the impression he could, by ground, he could
gonna
strangle us off.
Yeah, he was
Okay.
going to starve them out.
Okay.
Well, there's 2.3 million Germans in there. And we kept them going for, the lift lasted about 13 months or something like that. But they didn't stop. They ran another 3-4 months to build up supplies after they lifted the blockade. The C-54 hauled 10 ton. So I know the Americans, the total tonnage was almost 2,400,000 tons. And the British, I think theirs was around 600,000 tons. British did a good job, but their airplanes were smaller. They all 2 or 3 tons at a time. These bombers, you know, stuff like that. And our tonnage was over 1 point, I forget, but over about 1.5 million tons.
Wow. Wow.
So 1.75 million.
So I imagine for that 13-month stretch, you pretty much went straight out. I mean, was there any R&R to get away from that, or did you work pretty solid through that?
The only R&R we had was a beer hall. That German beer was pretty good too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Here you said you had some German mechanics working for you, and you're in Germany. I mean, 2 years prior to that, these guys were our enemies.
Oh yeah.
How was the interaction with these guys?
Well, let me tell you something. When I was in school in Regent, North Dakota, I was taught to hate the Japs and the Prouts, you know? That was taught to us.
Yeah.
So when I went to Germany, I had a chip on the shoulder. But once I got to working with these guys, I soon realized that they're no different than our guys. They fought for their country. And they were patriotic, you know? And they were darn good mechanics. And I had one guy that was a fighter pilot. He shot down 26 airplanes. And the one he feared the most was a P-38.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's what he told me. But he was a glider pilot when he was 12 years old. He flew the 163, you know, that rocket airplane, and the 262.
Really?
And he was in Galan's Squadron, if you know anything about the German and Luftwaffe. He's a very famous commander. He was in his outfit. Had another one that flew 109s, ME-109 over Russian lines. He was hit and his engine's on fire, and it burned him bad. But he didn't dare land on the Russian side. They shot him immediately. So he stayed with it and got back and bellied in on their field. And his buddy, who had been with him all the time, pulled him out of the airplane, saved his life. Both of them worked for me. And this poor guy, you could see that he was a good, handsome, blonde Germanic type person, but he had no eyelids. He was all scabs, you know. And the poor guy couldn't close his eyes, you know, he'd dab in his eyes with his... And that was, if that had been American, he'd been in the hospital, they fixed him up. But in Germany, you're good enough to walk, and after the war, there was nothing they could do, you're just gone, you know. So I really enjoyed the German people. And I've been back there 3 times. And when I go to Berlin, I'm treated like a king.
Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we get the red carpet treatment.
Yeah,
Last summer they went, and they were all expenses paid, the few that went. Now, when I was going, there was like 75. You couldn't do that. But the last time I went, they sent me $1,200. This is the people of Berlin.
Wow. Still
Now,
grateful.
They haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
Now, the young kids could care less.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, was there, when you were there, was there still a lot of damage from the war?
Our field, there was holes all over, bomb holes, wrecked German airplanes. And we had a clay track, which is like a caterpillar with rubber treads. It would go pretty fast, about 18 miles an hour. On midnights, we'd go out and chase rabbits. Run one in a bomb hole and have to pull it out. We had fun.
Did you ever get a chance during the airlift to catch a ride into Berlin, or?
No, I never went to Berlin.
Yeah.
I went to Paris 4 or 5 times.
Well, that's another question too. Here we've got this this country boy from rural North Dakota. I imagine growing up, you probably didn't travel too far away from where you grew up.
Well, I did. I had relatives on the West Coast. I'd been there, and in Minneapolis. So
Well, I guess more so than a lot of your generation. But here's a guy that gets into the service in different parts of the country, and then he's in Europe. What was that like as to see that?
You have to adapt. When you go to a foreign country or even a foreign city,
Yeah.
you have to be one of them. You can't say, well, this ain't the way we did it in Denver, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you have to adapt. I lived in Honolulu 3 years, and that was an experience because that's a whole different culture over there, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
And my boss, when he took me to town, he met me at the airplane, he says, I'll give you some advice. He says, you go native when you're over here, because that's the way they live. And I got along fine with those people. Some of the nicest people I ever met in my life.
Well, getting back to Germany there. Boy, talking about when you were taxiing that plane over to work on it, and all those planes were leaving. There was a lot of crashes and such. Did you have any accidents there on the base?
Yes.
And
I and another guy were out, it was about 1 in the morning, and we're pumping the strut up on the nose wheel. Sometimes they'd lose air, you had to pump them up. And we had the cleat track and this pump jack, and we're pumping up the thing, and all of a sudden it's snowing. Big drops. Well, much worse than this today. And all of a sudden the sky lit up, a fire, you know, like that, it exploded. Never heard it, but I could see the flash. And an airplane crashed just about a half mile from the end of the runway. Killed 3 guys. And the co-pilot, his sister became a very good friend of mine.
is that right?
Yeah, after I got into Berlin Airlift Veterans, she came every time because of her brother, and she wanted to know the story. So I told her what I knew about it, you know. And
Now, how did you guys figure out that that was her brother in that crash?
well, I didn't know that till years later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, there was one guy that was killed out of my barracks. He wasn't a real good friend of mine, but you know how you talk.
You sure?
You know,
Yeah.
you talk to him. His name was Donnie Stone. We lost 31 guys, 17 accidents. We had a couple of mid-airs. Of course, that's fatal to everybody.
Mm.
But you're not hauling a big load. You know, not a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got pilot, co-pilot, and engineer, and that's usually it.
Right. Were they giving you keeping you updated on how things were going with the airlift as far as
Oh, the Task Force Times. Yeah, we had a paper, 4-page paper. Well, I mean 4 sides of paper. each morning, and we'd go have coffee and read the tonnage from the day before. And Jake Schubert always had a cartoon in there. Like, I remember one, to give you an example, this mechanic standing guard on the fire guard. You know, he always stood fire guard when he started because they'd catch on fire. So here he's got his head through the prop, you know, and the co-pilot hollers out, "Quit clowning and get on number 4." You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a good artist, and he became a good friend of mine.
Is that right?
Yeah, and another one that, I don't know if you ever heard of the Candy Bomber. His name is Gale Halverson. He was a second lieutenant. He was out of the squadron at Mobile. He flew C-74s, and then when the lift started, they sent him to Rhine, Maine. And he got a day off one day, so he bummed a ride to Berlin so he could go talk to these kids, because he always saw them out the end of the runway. Huh? You know this story?
Oh, okay. Yeah, but please tell it to the viewers.
Okay, anyway, he borrowed a Jeep, went over there where the cemetery was, because they come right in over the cemetery between the buildings, you know. And he's talking to all these kids, and they're all happy to see him, you know. I mean, they're really good kids. And when he left, he wanted to give him something. He reached his pockets, all he had was 2 sticks of gum. So he gave him those 2 sticks of gum, and they broke it up in little pieces, so each kid would get one, and then that didn't go around, so they took the paper and let him smell of it, you know, little piece of paper. That so impressed Gale that he says, "Well, when I come over next time, I'll drop you some stuff out of the airplane." And they said, "Well, how will we know who you are? Because these airplanes are coming." You know,
Yeah.
And he said, "I'll wiggle my wings when I'm out of the ways, you know, so you can tell it's coming. I'm coming. And get ready." So he started dropping stuff out of the airplane. He'd make a parachute out of a handkerchief and tie a, say, Hershey bar to it and throw it out the window. Of course, I'm talking hundreds of, I don't know how many tons of candy they dropped, but anyway, the word got around, and it was in the papers, and his CO called him and says, "Lieutenant, what the heck are you doing? You're doing something that, you know, against regulations." And so he explained what he's doing. He says, "Well, I don't care if it's against regulation or not, keep it up." So Gale's known all over the world. He's going to be talking at Hill Air Force Base here next week. He's 88 years old. He lives in Utah. Now there's a guy to interview, I tell you. He's a real nice guy. He's a devout Mormon. He's just an all-around gentleman. And later, back in the late 60s, he became commander of Rhine, Maine. And he was always on demand to go talk to a school or something, you know, because they all knew who he was.
Yeah.
But this got to be a big deal. Of course, Gale didn't drop all the candy. The other crews got into it, and they used to have parachute tying deals in the barracks. You know, everybody tying parachutes and tying candy bars. And he was called back to the States. And he was on one of those New York shows. I don't remember. It was one of those variety shows, you know.
Uh-huh.
And they interviewed him, and he met a guy there, and the man says, "Would you like some more candy?" He said, "Oh yeah, we can use candy." So the guy sent a boxcar full of Hershey's. He was the head honcho, I guess, at Hershey candies. So they had a lot of candy.
Huh.
And they had kids all over the United States tying parachutes and sending them over. I forget how many tons of candy that was dropped, but you talk to a German, I mentioned a candy bomber, they know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Well, really, from what I understand, the airlift was kind of the start of the Cold War. Did you ever, tensions were pretty tight then, did you ever get the feeling, or was the feeling in the air that, boy, we're this close to going to war with Russia? Or
All the time.
Yeah.
And they issued me a carbine, 30 caliber, automatic, little gun, pop gun. We all had them, and we had them in Iraq, and heck, we never got them out. They had a half inch of dust on them. and they'd call a base alert, get us all out. Now this is the first year.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I wouldn't answer base alert. Once I got on that 74 crew, I wouldn't answer. But grab your rifle, go get in a 6x and go out and blockade Audubon. Well, if the Russians had come, you know, they say the Russians are coming. Well, if they had come, all you could do is wave at them, you know.
Yeah.
No ammo, empty guns. That was kind of a joke.
Yeah.
But we had that threat because Stalin had 300 divisions in eastern Germany. We had one, and a constabulary. We had the constabulary in Berlin and the big red one, and that was it. You know, I mean, all they could do was wave at them, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a little hairy, but now some of the crews got shot at. And one of my friends was a pilot in the Navy. He had a balloon. He was going along in the fog, you know, doing instruments, and the airplane shuddered, he said, and almost stopped. And then it went on and got to Berlin and got to looking, there was bits of rubber in all 4 engines. He cut the top right off of the balloon.
Wow.
They'd send him up on purpose so they'd run into him. You know?
Wow.
And the Yak fighters used to buzz them. And there's some of them come in with holes in the tail, you know. They never did kill anybody, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
harass.
Yeah. Well, you'd said earlier, you know, that you're in that kind of that special division that your corporal set up. But so you felt that living conditions were pretty good for you as far as sleeping and food and.
Let me tell you something. You could have threw a cat out of our barracks every 4 feet because they were all prefab, made in Sweden, I think, and they were shacks, no insulation, just a board to cover the cracks, and we had these little bitty, GI stoves, about that big. We had 3 of them, and of course the fire would go out in the middle of the night, you know, so somebody'd have to put the fire in. But it was miserable. We had plenty of blankets. I just pile on the blankets, go sleep, and forget it. But the worst thing was the mess hall, where the troop, we had 10,000 guys eating in one mess hall in Rhine, Maine, and it wasn't the cook's fault. They were good cooks, but they didn't have anything to work with.
Yeah.
That was the problem. And all these guys, you know, like breakfast would start at, I think it was 11 at night, and go till 9, and then lunch went from 9 to 3, and then dinner was from 4 to 11. So they changed 3 meals, but we ate mutton all the time, mutton. We had mutton burgers, roast mutton, fried mutton, every way you could fix it. And it's lucky the Berlin Airlift didn't last 1 more year, because there wouldn't have been sheep left in Australia. We'd ate them all. And I'm not talking lamb, I'm talking old ewes. That was horrible.
Boy.
Now, on the flight line, we had these passes. We put on flight suits, and we go there, they thought we was officers. And we had steak and fried chicken.
How often were you able to do that, though?
Whenever we were on duty.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we'd just take a Jeep. 3 guys go, the crews were 3s, so we'd go with 3s. And we ate good there.
Were you able to ever get a pass and go into town and go to a beer hall or get a German meal or anything like that?
Class A pass. I can go anytime I want to. I can leave the base at 3 in the morning if I wanted to. That's something else I got out of this, being this special crew. Yeah.
So you're able to get into town and go to
yeah,
a local beer hall or get a German meal or.
Camels cost 9 cents a pack. I go to town with 2 packs of Camels and have a heck of a time. Drink beer for 3-4 hours, have the best meal in the best restaurant.
Just trading those Camels, huh?
Yep. Yeah, they were like, I think when I first went there, like 100 marks. That's like $100 a pack, you know.
Wow.
And you know, you can buy a good meal for 12, 14 marks. So we'd have a good meal and come home with money in our pocket. I'd never go to town with money. I just go to a couple packs of cigarettes. I smoked, but I didn't. I think I was allowed 2 cartons a week. Well, I didn't smoke near that much, you know. And candy. Oh man, the Germans were like a Hershey bar. They go nuts over that. I never had coffee, you know. Of course, you can buy coffee at PX. You buy a pound of coffee, you give that to a German family. I mean, you're a friend for life, you know.
Oh, yeah. Did you befriend some Germans over there at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, mostly about the crews.
No
guys
Canadians.
that work
Okay.
on it.
Uh-huh.
I want to tell you about two characters in our squadron.
Okay.
They were dogs.
Oh.
You weren't allowed to have dogs, but we had two of them. And Big John was a big old farm-type dog, white with brown spots all over it. Big brown spots. And Big John had been picked up in Leoti, Africa. The squadron, when they had flown the hump in World War II. Coming back, they stopped at Leoti, Africa that's on the west coast of Africa. That's where they picked up Big John, and he was a member of Squadron. And the way he got his name, because we had this old sergeant that had been in the services about like 1905. He had like 40-some years in the service. And they walked just like each other, you know. So he was Big John. And everybody loved that dog, you know. And he hated officers. Oh man, he hated officers. And he'd be in the barracks, and in the summertime, have the window open. Somebody come in and call attention, an officer come in, right through the window, right, just jump right out of the window. Or if the windows weren't open, he'd sneak under the bunks till he got to the door and make a boy run for it. He just hated him. I don't know why. Well, of course, if they caught you, they'd probably send him to pound, I suppose. I don't know. Then Big John liked to ride an airplane. And say I was going to taxi an airplane to the terminal. Well, you get the logbook. It's a metal encased book, and everything's in there that pertains to the airplane. You get the book and you start out the door. Big John, boy, he was with you. And you walk out to an airplane, and while you always had to do a circle check, you know, check everything out. The ladder set a straight ladder out to the back door. Big John would climb that ladder. And you get up in the airplane, and the guy pull the ladder away, close the door, go up there, here's old Big John sitting in the pilot's seat. He wanted to drive. You know? You have to kick him out of the seat. He'd ride to the terminal. Then we got to the terminal, he couldn't go down the ladder, so you'd have to carry him down. You know, he weighed about 50, 60 pounds, I suppose. He was something. Then Dizzy was the Spitz. He looked like a Spitz. I don't know if he wasn't purebred, I suppose. But that dog was nuts. We'd be running an engine, you know, power, and there's always a vortex below the engine, and he'd like to stand in that vortex, especially if there's water, to take a bath, you know, and bark at the tips of the, and we always figured if he jumped, he off went the head, you know, but he never did. He was a nutty dog.
Were they both there together, or were they at separate times?
Well, they were separate, but they were in the same squad.
Oh, okay.
But they'd bum their meals. Down at the mess hall, there's so many people ate there. When you went to the mess hall, you'd probably hundreds in the line to get in the door. Well, Dizzy'd go along till he found somebody he knew, and then he'd stand by him, you know. He'd follow him. It's just if they moved up 3 feet, he'd move up 3 feet, right to the door. And then he always give you a look, you know, when you went in. Now, you're going to bring me something, aren't you? It was something. Everybody loved those dogs. I wonder whatever happened to them.
Yeah. Did you ever, during that period of time, was it a stressful time for you? Do you feel?
No, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. See, most squadrons that flew the lift were 12 on, 12 off, 7 days a week. They never got a day off. Now, with the deal I had, there's times I went a week and didn't do a darn lick. But there's other days I worked 3 or 4 days, you know, without getting off. Especially if we had something major on an airplane, like a cylinder change or something, or a tire change. Those tires were 7 foot high, and it was with a big forklift. It was the only way to do it. So it took time. Well, maybe the next airplane come in, and now you have 2 on the ground. Well, you try to get the first one out, and then you work on the second one, and here comes the third one. Well, that's when you really got in trouble. If it was one airplane, it wasn't too bad. Usually, we'd work all night on it, and the next morning could take it out.
Well, I mean, so with those conditions, when you'd say, oh, sometimes you'd have like 7 days off. It's nothing that you could plan. Like, oh, next week I'm going to go off to Paris.
No.
You just never knew. You never really knew your schedule, did you?
No.
Yeah.
No, what I used to do if I did go to town, sometimes stay over, we'd call in and ask call dispatch and say what's on the board, and then tell us if there's one coming, I'd scoot back. Because we had to be there a half hour before they arrived to get ready for them, and we had to stay an hour after they left in case something happened and had to come back.
Okay.
But the guys on the lift had it worse than I did, I think. 12 on, 12 off gets tiresome, you know?
Well, I kind of get the impression, though, that you didn't get a whole lot of sleep either. I mean, you're saying you go up in the flight crew and sleep a little bit, but I don't think you're getting solid sleep.
You're not catching up. You're getting behind all the time. Well, one time, that time I told you it was so long, I went to the barracks, went to bed, and I don't think I rolled over for 24 hours. When I woke up, I didn't know what day it was. You know, I was completely worn out.
Wow.
But that was the game, you know.
Yeah.
And I was well rewarded because I didn't stand retreat, I didn't stand reveille, I didn't stand inspections, no KP, no nothing, you know.
Yeah.
We were elite. I was where the elite meet. Yeah.
And talk a little bit now as the lift starts to wind down, and what prompted that, and a little bit of history of.
Well, after I worked at the airplane about 6 months, they sent 5 of us off my crew to Brooklyn, and we spent 30 days.
Brooklyn's in Alabama?
Yeah.
Okay.
Learning the airplane. Well, we were in the barracks, and we'd go down and meet roll call at, I think it was 7 in the morning. It was early, I don't know, 7 I think. And there's 300 mechanics standing in the street waiting for assignments, and they'd say, name off 10 guys, you're at flight or airplane number so-and-so, you're in the tire shop, it's all these guys. And it get done, and us 5 standing there, and the guy'd turn and walk off and leave us there. So we'd go to shop by shop or airplane by airplane, pick up what we could, and we trained ourselves, you know. And then we were always first in line for chow at noon. And we'd go back to barracks, take a nap, and go to town. Well, we did that for 30 days. During that time is when the lift officially ended. So when we got back, we didn't quite have the pressure on us we had before. But they really didn't slow down much, I mean, because they wanted to build stockpile, you know, in Berlin.
What prompted the airlift to end? Did Stalin figure out his plan just wasn't working and opened up?
No.
Yeah.
Truman beat him at his game. You know, there was 3 major things of the Cold War. The first one was the Berlin Airlift. They got beat there. The next one was Berlin, the Marshall Plan. Because I saw the difference when I went back there in '95.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a bit.
No, you want me to skip it for now?
Oh, well,
Anyway, the third thing was the Cuban Missile Crisis with Kennedy. They got beat all 3 times. And then, of course, we got Reagan, and Reagan knew how to take care of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'll put a little politics in, and I think Reagan's the best president we ever had.
What were your thoughts of Truman back then? He was your president while you were...
I hated Truman's guts.
Is that right?
But I wish to heck we had him today.
Yeah. I'll be darned.
Yeah. You know, I missed getting another year and a half. But I got discharged on the 28th. See, I enlisted the 29th of June. I was barracks chief down here at Laurie Field in a casual barracks. 30, 40 guys waiting to get discharged. 2 days, a week, a month, 2 months, whatever. I went over that morning at 9 o'clock, got my papers. I was the only one. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, they froze everything. Canceled all leaves, put everybody on alert, gave them another year and a half service, you know. So I got my 3 years to the day and got out.
Just within hours, huh? Of,
5 hours out of it, another hour, year and a half.
well, let's talk about that period before then. From when after the airlift ended, how much longer were you there in Germany before you were transferred to wherever your next assignment was?
I was still a crew chief on the 74s until about March 15th of 50, because I got on an airplane and flew back to Wendover and got there on St. Patty's Day. Remember that? And when my buddy and I were together, still together, we decided to go to Denver. I'd never been to Denver, he had. And
now, is this the buddy that you went out to California with initially?
Well, listen, there's 3 good friends of mine that are still alive. Well, one of them just died in December. He was stationed in Paris, and I used to go to Paris and see him. He was a hillbilly from Mississippi. And I've been to his place, his farm, and I think 3 or 4 times. I used to go to Texas Motorhome, and I'd go by there and see Jesse. And he was a talk with a drawl. When we were in basic, he was 15 years old. He could drink whiskey like that moonshine, you know. He could put her away at 15 years old.
Wow. How did he manage to get in at 15? I wonder.
Well, about his age, I don't know. There's a lot of guys who did that. He was the one I personally knew, but I was with Jesse through basic, I was in my class at tech school. He went on to Chanute to be an electrician specialist. I went to Germany. When he got done with special school here, he came with Hugh Tucson. I knew both of them, and then Paul Curtis came over in my squadron. I knew him in school. I didn't know him in basic, but I knew him in school. He's still a friend of mine. He lives in Fort Worth, and he lives in Kansas City, Gladstone, Missouri. Hugh was a smart guy, and he went to college to become an engineer. He engineered on B-52s his entire life, just one airplane. His whole career was on B-52s. But doing electrical engineering. Curtis came back, and he wasn't licensed, but that's another thing I did. I went to school at Rhine, Maine, for a year and a half, 2 hours in the afternoon. And when I got out, I got an A&E license.
Now this is while
This is a mechanic's license, federal.
You took the schooling while still handling your duties with the airlift?
Yeah, they used to let me off 2 hours in the afternoon if I was working days. If not, if it was midnights, that was tough getting up in the middle of the night, my night, to go to school. But I stuck with it. I only missed 3 days, a year and a half. Anyway, I got that A&E ticket. And when I got ready to leave Rhine, Maine, the colonel called me in easily. He says, of course he called me Colgrove. He said, Colgrove, he said, I want you to re-enlist. He says, I'll guarantee you a tech sergeant within a year. I said, Colonel, I got this A&E ticket. That's the key to any backdoor airline I want, So I said, I'm going to get out. So I went back to North Dakota after I got discharged in Denver here, and I bummed around, farmed, drove a gas truck, stuff like that. I liked to farm, but my dad and I had a chance to start farming, but would have taken, he had 100,000, we could have started. But if you have three crop failures, you're done, forever.
Yeah.
That's very risky.
Yeah.
So I went to the West Coast with 3 other guys, and one of them got a job driving a 7-Up truck from Skid Row in Spokane. The next one got a job as a lumberjack in Battleground, Washington. And George and I went on down to California. I go back a ways. We used to go to get a job at McNary Dam. They were building that. We went down there, shift change. There, these guys walking on these 2x4s, 100 feet above the water. I don't think I want to do that. So we stopped and had lunch at this temporary town they'd built, and had Oregonian paper. So I went and bought an Oregonian and opened it up and says, United Airlines mechanics. I says, guys, I know where I'm going. So I went to Portland, took the test, flew me to San Francisco, took the mechanical test, passed everything, went to work there in San Francisco.
For United?
Yeah. That was in a maintenance base. And I had my A&E, which you have to have that to work on a flight line. And in those days, it was kind of hard to get. Anyway, after my 90th day, I bid Denver. That was on a Monday night. On Thursday night, I got my bid, and I left on Saturday. So I got the heck out of there, because in a maintenance base, you do the same job over and over. So it's like a factory, and I didn't like that. I wanted to get on one. So came to Denver, stayed 2 years in Denver, and then bid Honolulu, went over there for 3 years. Then came back to Denver, spent the rest of my 35 years here.
35 years with United?
Yeah.
Altogether?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Ah.
You know, I could fly all over the world free, you know, but I don't. My legs hurt too bad. I just can't do it.
Huh. I'll be darned.
Well, when I say free, it's minimal charge.
Yeah, right, right.
Probably from here to Australia would be $20 or something like that. You know? That's the place I always wanted to go, never got there. I wanted to go down there and see if they got any sheep left.
Yeah, right. Well, let's talk a little bit now. You've said that you were a member of the Airlift Association.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, reunions and
it's
some of your
great.
trips that you've taken. And
Some of the best friends I've ever made in my life are in that outfit. And there's no rank in there. We have a couple generals, and it goes on down to PFCs, you know. And everybody's treated the same. And I've been to, oh gosh, every air base in the United States, I think. And we always lay a wreath for the 31 guys that died. I and two other guys went to Great Falls and laid the wreath up there. That was about 3 years ago. Laid the wreath at the Air Force Academy, Tucson, down Texas, where was it? I can't remember where it was in Texas. But just all over. We got wreaths all over, or plaques, I should say. Like the one in Great Falls, this retired master sergeant, one of the three guys, he goes out there in the field and picks up a big rock and brought it in, and we put it on there.
Huh.
And it's in their museum. They got a nice little museum
Yeah.
up there, several airplanes.
any idea? You lost 31 people in your area. You know how
No,
many?
Americans, 31 Americans. British lost 37.
So there was 31 in the whole entire
30.
airlift, or lost?
No, there was more, but related to the flying, there was 31.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you got killed in a truck, they didn't count that.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Because there's a lot of that stuff too, you know. Guys getting run over on the ramp and dark. Fog. You've never seen fog like over there. One night we were coming from the hangar to the barracks, and there was a truck compound. We went right through the gate and never knew we went through the gate. When we got in there, we were on the wrong side of the fence. It took us a while to realize what we'd done, so we had to go back out and go around the fence. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, you could almost cut it with your hand.
Wow. And you guys were flying in those conditions. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, once in a while, if it got extremely bad, they were grounded. But what you see here is a bad fog. They flew in that. As long as they could see two lights, they would take off, you know. And they came in GCA. You know what that is?
No.
There's a guy down the runway in a radar shack. He picks them up about maybe 10, 15 miles out, and he talks them all the way in. And when they get close, he says, no, don't answer any transmissions. Just listen, you know. And you'll say you're 50 feet high. You're right of the glide path. You're left of the glide path. And they're corrected, see. And when he gets down to the ground, he says, okay, you should be able to see the ground land, you know. Well, if they didn't, they poured the coal to it, went around, and tried again.
Wow. Wow.
But you know, in Berlin, there's so many airplanes coming in there, like one a minute. They could not afford to miss a landing. If they overshot or missed their approach, all the way back to one of the bases. We had Wiesbaden, Rhein-Main, and Vosburg and Celle. 4 of them that were American controlled, and the British had 5 or 6 other ones. I'm not familiar with those. But I've been to Celle, I've been to Vosburg, and I've been to Rhein-Main. We have monuments in all those places.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your trips over to Germany, and particularly what we were talking about earlier before we started the interview, which I found very interesting.
What part?
About when you went back to your base and you were walking around wondering what was different about it.
Oh, yeah, in '95, I went back to Rhein-Main. Of course, all our old barracks were gone. They had permanent brick-type buildings. And where I worked, there was a big cargo building. But the old 4 hangars that I was part of are still there.
Is that right?
Yeah. And we had lunch in the officers club. And I was telling this bird colonel about it. He says, you want to see that hangar? I said, I sure do. So he took me down. We broke into that hangar, and he showed me the inside, being the colonel. And it was, you know, it really almost brought tears to my eyes. Of course, none of our stuff was in there. I mean,
yeah.
We had shops built in there and all that, so 2 airplanes come in from each side. And we had slots so the tail could come in. But they'd made it out into a meeting room with chairs all over the stage. But that was touching, and to see that place where I worked, you know.
Yeah, yeah. But talk about, you said there was something.
Oh, yeah. When I got there, something was missing, you know, there's something strange. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, there's no engines running. When I was there was always a roar of the engines, you know. They were either taking off, a prop airplane makes a lot of noise. And there were mechanics were running the airplane at full speed, you know, and this is going on day and night. Of course, after 2 or 3 days, you didn't hear them anymore, but in the back of your mind, you got that there. And when I went back in '95, it wasn't there, and something was wrong.
I'll be darned. Yeah. And you said too that you've actually taken trips into Berlin.
Yeah, I've been to Berlin a couple times.
Talk a little bit about the experience there and the reception you would get and such.
First, well, let's see, that was '95, and we stayed in the East Zone. I was kind of uncomfortable about that, but the Russians had left in '89, so I went down to Checkpoint Charlie, and I bought a Russian hat, officer's hat, and a belt buckle from Russians. And that was interesting to go to Checkpoint Charlie because I'd seen it on TV so many times.
Yeah.
And of course we went to Tempelhof, and that Tempelhof has got a hangar and terminal. It's all one building, and it curves. You've probably seen pictures of it. It probably makes almost a quarter of an arc, and you could put airplanes in any place. You know? And we were down in the basement, and there's a train track that goes underneath the whole thing. And the guide told us, the German guide says, we made what the heck was it? Can't remember the number, but the fighter plane that had the reciprocating engine, the 109 had an inline, but what the heck do they call that? These Messerschmitt. But they made them in there. And they only had like 6 inches clearance on the walls. They take it out and they put the wingtips on, and it couldn't bomb them, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And that went all through the water, the factory down there. Tracks were still there.
Was there a museum or any sort of memorials for the Berlin Airlift that you would visit
right
there?
Right in front of the terminal, there's 3 big arches. They go up, and that represents the 3 quarters. And there's I don't think there's any statues. but there's rocks, with writing on them, all that. And around the perimeter is the names of all the guys that got killed. And that was kind of impressive, because
Yeah. Yeah.
there was Donnie Stone there. We had a project. The base at Wiesbaden named all the streets for those guys that were killed. And back about 90 or somewhere back in there, they decided they were going to change the names because the Germans were taking over that part. So they gathered all these up and sent them to us. So
The street signs?
Yeah, street
Okay.
signs. So we tried to deliver them to the families of all these guys that were named. And that took 4 or 5 years to find them all.
Mm.
And then, since then, we've put wreaths on their graves. And I was involved in 3 of them. One at the academy was a master or tech sergeant, and a lieutenant down in Corpus Christi. And I was the chairman of that one. And I was down in Donna, Texas, right on the border. And I called these guys in Legion, in Corpus Christi. Most of them are Spanish Americans, very nice people. And they set it all up for me. And we had honor guard.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We put a wreath on the guy's grave. And this one guy told me, he says, I'll put a wreath, as long as I live, there'll be a wreath on here in Memorial Day.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned too that while in Germany, when they realized that you were part of the airlift, that you were treated like a king.
Oh, yeah.
But by the local, by the Germans. Yeah.
Yeah, we went to Celle, and we were treated, I met the mayor of every city, including Berlin. I can't think of his name, Ruder? Was that his name? Yeah. And he's got a man, Hans Rees. He's the one in charge of Friendship Forever, they call it. They say they'll be our friends forever. And he raises money, and in '95 he'd raised $7 million to put this on. We had boat rides, and we had banquets, and just one thing after. And then in '98, I went back, or '99, and we had a battle of the bands in that big stadium where Jesse Owens ran. You talk about a big stadium. That's 3 times as big as our stadium.
Huh.
And we had, I'd guess 75,000 Berliners there. And I was assigned a pretty young girl, about 17. Anything I want, she'd run get me. Want to get Coke or what? She just sat by my side all the time. And I really appreciated that, because I can't hardly walk.
Yeah,
anymore,
right.
And they had a big banquet for us in the tent, and then we went into the stadium. And then they marched all the airlifters in. Of course, I wasn't there. I couldn't march. But here with the British, I thought I liked the British. They're sharp when they march.
Yeah.
And of course, ours sloppy old GIs come marching in. Of course, you don't march as good as you did when you was 18 years old.
Oh, fair enough. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start to wind down this interview. How do you think that time period over there played into your life? Did it affect your life, your way of thinking? Or did it? Or was it just a segment of your life?
I've always been patriotic ever since I was a little kid. My dad was that way, and I was that way. And I think it enforced that patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
I did something for my country. Now, I wanted to be in World War II, but I was too young.
Too young.
I always wanted to be a fighter pilot, But I really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah.
Although it was, but I was used to hard work anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what it was,
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
There was nothing glorious about it.
Well,
Yeah.
it was a very important aspect of the lift, though. I mean,
Well,
a
we
very
didn't
vital
realize
part.
that then,
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
just doing the job.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we'll wind this down, Corky. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, or any stories that you're thinking of now that we didn't talk about, that you want to talk about before we kind of close her off?
Oh, but if I looked at that list, I could find.
Just want me to want to.
Just shut up. One day, my friend and I Sunday we were off, so we took a walk. And we went out in the woods, and just not a quarter mile from our hangar, or from our barracks, was a secret airstrip. In the woods, the trees come right over the top. And you could look, it was like looking down the tunnel, and they would take off the ME-109s. They had hard stands all along where they could park them in the trees. And they had 88 anti-aircraft guns all over the place. Of course, all of them been blown by the Army and they split open the barrels. But that was interesting. Bombs laying all over.
So this was a secret German from the war?
Yeah,
Still?
yeah.
Is that right? Huh.
See, what they'd do is they'd land at Rhine-Main and then they'd go taxi in there and hide. When the bombers come, they'd take off. They would like going down a tunnel. And when they got to the end, they'd pull up out of the trees. Well, the Americans never knew where they was, so they never got bombed, you know.
I'll be darned. That must have been fascinating.
Another thing about Rhine-Main is when my squadron got there, there's a lot of underground facilities in Rhine-Main. And they had machine shops and clothing warehouses and armories and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And the guys could get down there. There, over by the terminal, there was one entrance. There was three entrances across the field from each other. And I knew guys that had been down there, but they had to be careful because there was booby traps and you know that kind of. So finally, the engineers just blew all the entrances in because they didn't want somebody hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was amazing the underground stuff they had. They didn't have airplanes down there, but you know, they'd hide them in the trees. There's big pine trees all around Rhine-Main. And in 95, I think, or maybe it was 98, might have been 98, they were wanting to build another runway. They'd already built one cross runway, big runway for C-747s and that sort. The guy said, we're wanting to get another runway, but the environmentalists are giving us heck, you know. I said, you already got one. Why don't you use it? He said, what do you mean? I said, there's a secret around those trees over there. I said, just build it bigger. You're not going to build a new one. You're just going to increase the size. I don't know if they thought of doing that or not. I knew there was a runway over there because I'd been on it. I walked the whole length of it.
I'll be done.
Yeah. You know, like we was talking about the food just so bad. One time we stole corn from a farmer's field. Full field corn. We cooked it in a helmet in our stove, you know. Fired up the stove and cooked it in the helmet. Boy,
so as far as food, you had it on both ends of the spectrum, from corn in a helmet to nice steaks in the officers' club, huh?
Well, I never made the officers' club, but we did have what do they call that? It was a first-class mess where you could go eat. It was special service that, and you could get a little steak, you know, like a minute steak. And that was pretty good food, but you couldn't afford, I couldn't afford to go there very often, you know. I did go down there and eat a few times, but usually what I'd do is go to PX and get these jars of cheese and crackers and Vienna sausages and sardines and that kind of stuff, and I had in my locker. And if I'd go in a chow and the guy said, that's terrible, it's mutton, and I'd turn around and go back and eat sardines or something, you know.
I suppose to this day you haven't eaten mutton. Would you even eat mutton today, or?
No. No, I'm not talking about lamb. I'm talking about my wife has pulled that on me a couple of times with lamb chops. Tell me after I ate them.
But I imagine they're much better than they were back then.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wind down this interview, Corky. Is there any closing statement you'd like to make, just to kind of wind down this interview?
Well, I'll tell you what I learned in Germany. I've said this for the Air Force because it's true. I learned compassion. Because when I went to Germany, I hated the lousy crowds, you know? And working with them, I found out what nice people they were. And talk about heroes, they had heroes too, you know? Now, we could turn into Germany so fast in this country with doing away with our Constitution. We gotta fight that, or we'll be just like them. By the time they woke up, it was too late. Hitler had a hold of them. And I'm afraid that, this is political, but I'm afraid that's gonna happen in this country.
Wow.
And taking our guns away.
Yeah.
You know, all they're gonna do is make 90 million criminals.
Well, Corky, I want to thank you for spending the time today to tell your story. More importantly, though, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you. I didn't really do that much.
Yeah,
Never saw combat.
That's debatable.
Never shot it.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.